And so then I went kind of on the trail, and I found that the Jewish rabbis, they even traced their rabbinic lineage back to Adam, and they say Adam was the first king and priest of all creation. And a lot of people thinks that this line of succession was known as the Order of Melchizedek, the kings and priests of creation, because when Melchizedek shows up in Genesis, which I believe was a Christophany, it was Jesus before he was incarnate. It says he was a king and priest of peace, of Salem, of peace. So when you track those garments, I went through and started tracking them, and it went from him to Enoch, Methuselah, Noah, and it was going through the good line till Ham stole them. And then, like we talked about last episode, when Ham uncovers his father's nakedness, he sleeps with his mother. And when the brothers take a garment, place on their backs and walk backwards and cover their father's nakedness, the original languages say the garment. They took the garment. So they took the symbol of kingship and priesthood and placed it back upon the father, refusing Ham's rebellion. But when Ham left, he stole them.
Aloha and welcome to another show, guys. Happy New Year, or as we say here, Haole Makahiki Ho, or in Japanese, Akemashite Omedetou. Happy New Year, guys. I'm officially kicking off the first episode of the year with my friend Doc Brown. And for those of you who may be new, Doc Brown is the host of his own podcast called Prometheus Lens, where he dives into hidden history, biblical mysteries, and some of the deeper, outside-of-the-box conversation that a lot of shows won't touch. Now, if you enjoyed the kind of topics we explore here, you're definitely going to want to check out his show as well. So make sure you head over and follow Prometheus Lens and show him some love on his side too. Now, before we get into today's conversation, I'm really excited to officially announce that I've opened up the plus side of the show on Patreon called WAIOLA, which in Hawaiian means water of life. WAIOLA, the plus side, is a space for deeper truths, growth, and real conversations that don't always fit the public side of the internet. It's $7.95 a month, and here's what that includes. You'll get the final 15 to 20 minutes of every episode, completely ad-free and uncensored. You'll also get access to Members Only Plus Discord, where we go in deeper into the conversation and keep these things going beyond the show. Now, Plus members can submit questions for upcoming guests, and I'll be selecting few of those questions to bring directly into the interviews. I'll also be giving Plus members shout-outs, calling out and thanking members by name as this community continues to grow. I want to thank CK Bond, Sam, Mary Blizzard, and Susan Lucy, my new Patreon, for becoming a WAIOLA member. Now let's get into today's episode. Now I'm really happy to welcome back my friend Doc Brown. The last time he was here, we went deep into Esau, the serpent seed theories, and the wild Bigfoot connection. And you guys absolutely loved it. That episode, honestly, blew up and we barely scratched the surface. But right at the end of that conversation, Doc mentioned something that I honestly never heard before, Adam's garment. So I had to invite him back onto the show so we could dive into that topic and unpack what that really means, where it comes from, and why that matters. Let's bring Doc Brown to this conversation. Enjoy the show.
The last time you were here, we went deep into Esau, the serpent seed theories, and the wild Bigfoot connection. The listeners absolutely loved it. That episode honestly blew up, and we barely scratched the surface. One thing we didn't explore, what I really wanted to dive into today, was Adam's garments. Right at the end of our last conversation, you mentioned it. And it was something that I honestly never heard before. So I knew I had to invite you back so we can get this information about this Adam's garment. I never heard of it before. So I would love to have you take me there.
Hmm.
What
Well,
is?
my first off, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I was the same way until 2 years ago. I just turned 40 last year. I'll be turning 41 in January. Been in church most of my life and thought I knew a lot, about the Bible and my faith, but it's been a wild journey. I heard about these supernatural garments from the Garden of God, and I had mentioned it briefly in our discussion about how uh, Nimrod, how let me back up, how Ham had stole the garments, and they went through Cush, and that's how Nimrod had them. And then the Book of Jasher depicted that fight between Esau and Nimrod, and he steals those garments. And so I kind of just touched on it a little bit, but that was my first time encountering those. And then once I started deep diving and looking through all the extra biblical books and the Ginsburg Legends of the Jews, it was this whole narrative surrounding these garments. And then I ended up getting in touch with Zen Garcia, and it was funny. I'd already wrote the book and got introduced to him, and he had written a book, or actually he's written several books, but two of the books honestly just lined up perfectly parallel with everything that I was finding. So to me, that was like Holy Spirit, confirmation right there.
Confirmation.
Because I had actually some people that accused me of kind of rifting off of him, and I was like, no, I never even heard of him or this book until after I released it. But we had exchanged, and he actually wrote a whole book on the garments, but he paired them with the supernatural rod of wonder. Like he said, it was a set, like Moses's rod. So it was the garment and this rod. And I think his book, he called it the garments from God and the rod of wonder, and kind of covered them also. So it was really cool. We when we met, we got real excited because how we had searched the same thing out, but I went deeper into Esau and his narrative than he did. So I give him a copy of my book, and he gave me a copy of his, and we kind of swapped info and gained even more info on it. So that was really cool.
Yeah. Did you have
So
him on
yeah,
your podcast?
yeah, yeah. I had him on the show, and we did a couple shows talking about that sort of thing. And so yeah, don't feel bad. I was 40 years old and never heard of it. But if I was to walk you through kind of how I found it, was, that Book of Jasher incident. And so I started reading deeper and got into Ginsburg, and they talked about, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Excuse me. So when I found that, my first instinct was like, well, what are these garments? And then later you have the incident with Noah that we talked about last time. And it said that this was passed down from Adam. And I was like, well, I have to go back to the garden and, go back to the beginning and read this, because I was always taught that their coverings were the first death, basically, that an animal, something had to die to be sacrificed to cover their sin, and that it was a
Yeah.
foreshadowing of Christ. And so to me, I was like, well, that makes sense. Even theologically, it's a beautiful picture, because I mean, yeah, if you look at it like that, you can easily see that that could be a foreshadowing of Christ shedding his blood and covering our sins. But the text just don't say that. And like I said, all these things that I was taught, I just assumed they were there, and read the book. I mean, I just didn't not read it, but I just kind of went over it really fast and didn't notice. And so there, when I went back, the text just says that he gave them a garment to cover their nakedness. Some translations say skins, but I mean, that's translations. But when you go back to the Hebrew, it says that he gave them a kanonet. And when you look at that word throughout the Old Testament, more often than not, that same word is translated as tunic. And with scholars, they have this thing called the law of first mention. So if they see a phrase or a word, the context of how that is used, a lot of times writers will refer to a past story and use that same word to reference and point back to that event connecting those events. Because when they were reading these same words, especially in the same book, they're like, oh, this same word was just up here a few chapters back. Let me go back. So, and that same phrase, to cover their nakedness, I found that that was used to describe the coverings of the priests. So when you go into the Levitical laws, it says in there that the priests are given a kanonet to cover their nakedness. And I was like, okay, if we take that law first mentioned, maybe they're pointing back to this event in the garden. And I started forming this this hypothesis because after that, Ezekiel 28 stood out to me, and that's condemnation to the king of Tyre. But all of a sudden it changes, and it's talking to a spiritual entity that was in the Garden of Eden. It says, you were in Eden, perfect in all your ways, and every precious stone was your covering, beryl, onyx, topaz, and I think we talked about that last time. And that's a Polaroid picture of the priestly ephod. So it's painting Satan in a priestly role. And it's maybe two verses down from that. It eliminates all doubt. It says that he even profaned his sanctuaries. So it's painting him in a priestly role with these priestly garments. It's even saying that he had a sanctuary. So it was like he was the first, overseer, head priest of creation in heaven, in the heavenly temple. And when I got through Ginsburg, looking at this, it says that their coverings given to them was the skins of the Nakash. And I was like, okay, I already know from my other studies, like through Michael Heiser, that this wasn't a snake. So it wasn't a snake skin. This was a shining one. Well, we know from Ezekiel 28, his coverings was this priestly ephod. So I started developing this theory. I was like, well, what if whatever happened in the garden, Satan was demoted and kicked out, and his position of authority was taken from him and given to his younger brother, Adam, if you look at it in the family aspect of God. So once again, it's like we talked about last time, all these micro narratives woven into the Bible of the battle of the brothers, and the younger is always favored over the older. Timothy Alberino did an excellent job in his book Birthright, talking about that's what that is. That's the overall story of the Bible, of the family of God and the battle amongst the family. So I was like, okay, if he was demoted, the garments were taken, it was bestowed upon Adam. And that's why Adam was given dominion, because basically this was the symbol of kingship and priesthood was bestowed upon Adam. So that was his coverings. And when I got to reading some of these other books, it falls right in line with what I was, thinking. So I was like, here, nothing news under the sun. Here, I thought I found this original thing, but no, I mean, they were talking about this thousands of years ago, and we're just now rediscovering these things, as Solomon says.
Wow. That's really crazy. Now, so I know there's so many questions that I have. First of all, does Genesis kind of hints, well, some people say Genesis hints that there was pre-Adamic race or humans before Adam. Where do you land on that? Do you think there were people before Adam came and before he sinned?
I think there was two creations, but the term pre-Adam or pre-Adamite, the only way that I would agree with that term is if they're talking about on Earth. I think that there was a race that was created and put in on Earth before Adam. Once again, this was something that once I went back to Genesis and got to reading, I was taught that, day 6, he creates man. And it says male and female. He created them. So he's talking about creating them together at once. And then later you get another story, but it's the creation of Adam. And he's pinched from the clay of the ground. And we get an undisclosed amount of time, but it has to be a significant amount of time because he's already had time to name all the animals. He's had time to get familiar with the land and to finally realize that he's lonely and that he needs a helpmate. So this had to be in my opinion, a significant amount of time to realize that what he was lacking. So, but I was always told that that was just a retelling of the same event that happened in Genesis 6. But when you read that with a closer, look, it says that when Adam was created, he was created before there was any vegetation on the ground. That's what it says. Well, vegetation was laid out on day 3. So we don't know when Adam was created, but we do know, if we believe what the texts say, he was created before day 3. It's just he was in Eden, and then earth was created, and this other day 6 people was put on the earth. And when Adam screwed up, he was kicked out of Eden and put into the general population of the other people. And those are the people why Cain is so scared. I mean, who's he afraid of? It's just this small little family when he's kicked out of the family. He's like, oh, they're going to kill me. What people? Who? Those people. Well, who did his children marry? Those people. It says he goes and builds a city. Well, with what people? Those people.
Wow. Okay, wait. So Satan, you said Satan ruled or was ruling or something before Adam. He was already on earth. This is it's the angel of light or the shining one.
Mm-hmm.
And you said day 6 people put on earth. Are you saying someplace else and came and put on earth?
Now, I just think like Eden was like not on earth, like it was separate. It was something else. So I don't know if it was uh, there, but in the upside down, like as Stranger Things goes,
Right,
or
right.
if it was a different planet, or if it was actually in heaven. I don't know where Eden was, but I believe it was separate because it describes it, as uh, a garden. I can't remember that word used now, but I do remember hearing a bunch of theologians and scholars talking about it, that that word describes an enclosure with walls, like
Oh,
an atrium. So
wow.
this was its own little separate thing away, I believe.
So Adam was there alone, possibly ruling over the animals or whatever. And then Eve came along, and then that's when they messed up. And
Mm-hmm.
and they were betrayed or they were deceived, or I guess
Mm-hmm.
it was Eve that was deceived, right? Um, and that's when they ate of the tree of knowledge, was it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and then after that, that's when they put the fig leaves together and they were hiding. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when Yahweh or Jehovah came and gave them the garments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And this garment was a skin of some sort garment of animal skin.
Yeah. That's what we were taught, but I think that skin was the priestly ephod, the robes of the priest, because he was saying, because both of them were punished.
Yeah.
So it was like, Adam, you were up here and had it made. So now you're going down there with the general population into the slums. You were in the nice cul-de-sac subdivision, but you messed up, and now you're going to the subdivision in the burbs in the lower part of Manhattan. You know what I mean? So, and at the same time, Satan was punished.
Mm.
His crown, his dominion that he had, over earth, and that population, I believe, was then bestowed upon Adam and given to him. Because Adam was actually called in Scripture a B'nai Ha Elohim, a son of God. And every time that phrase is used, it's talking about divine heavenly beings. So if you look at it with that kind of perspective, Adam himself was one who kept not his first estate. And Jesus was said he was the second Adam. Well, Jesus was a B'nai Ha. He was the B'nai Ha Elohim. And the New Testament tells us that that's the promise that we have. Paul says specifically that we will become sons of God like Adam. So we will return back into the family of God.
Wow. Okay, so what happened to these garments?
Yeah, and that was when I discovered that. And so then I went kind of on the trail, and uh, I found that the Jewish rabbis, they even traced their rabbinic lineage back to Adam. And they say Adam was the first king and priest of all creation. And a lot of people thinks that this line of succession was known as the Order of Melchizedek, the kings and priests of creation, because when Melchizedek shows up in Genesis, which I believe was a Christophany, it was Jesus before he was incarnate. It says what he was a king and priest of peace, of Salem, of peace. So when you track those garments, I went through and started tracking them, and it went from him to Enoch, Methuselah, Noah, and it was going through the good line till Ham stole them. And then, like we talked about last episode, when Ham uncovers his father's nakedness, he sleeps with his mother. And when the brothers take a garment, place on their backs, and walk backwards and cover their father's nakedness, the original languages say the garment. They took the garment. So they took the symbol of kingship and priesthood and placed it back upon their father, refusing Ham's rebellion. But when Ham left, he stole them, and he gives them to Cush, and then Cush hides them, and then he gives them to Nimrod. And it says that at the coming of age, at 20 years old, when Nimrod had his coming of age birthday, 20 years old, he was given these garments. Excuse me. And that he put on the garments. And at that time, he became a Gibborim. And it kind of answers the questions that a lot of us ask in Genesis, because it's kind of peculiar that Nimrod wasn't born a Gibborim. It plainly says he became a Gibborim. And a lot of people have speculated over the years, it was occult rituals, or it was occult sex magic, or it was, the Faustian bargain, or, all these different kind of ideas of how he became a Gibbor, a Nephilim. But the ancient Jewish belief in the text point to these garments. I mean, it could have been a combination of things, but the garments had, something to do with it. And it says that Adam and whoever wore these garments, that all of creation was submissive to them, that the animals would even bow to the wearer. And that's how how Noah got all the animals onto the boat.
Makes sense.
And then, and Adam, that's why all of them obeyed him and, didn't fight, and he named them all because he had these garments. He was the king and priest of creation. He was, subduing it.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I never heard that before. Wow.
Yeah, I hadn't either. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So Nimrod gets them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we knew by our conversation last time that Nimrod went to hunt and kill Esau because he looked like this beast of a man. And Esau ends up killing him and stealing these garments, and goes back home. He hides them, and then he goes into his brother's tent, tying into the Genesis story where it just says that he come in from the field exhausted. I mean, that's why he was exhausted, and he was desperate. He was on the run, so that's why he traded his birthright for. It wasn't a bowl of stew. I think that was kind of allegorical for, give me a life-saving potion, you know, or save or sew up my wounds and hide me. The king's men are looking for me. And we see these garments several times throughout Scripture, but when you don't know what to look for, you look right over it. And I think we see them again in that story when we get to the deception for the blessing. If you remember, Esau goes into his father's tent and he says, go hunting, son, and I want to taste your game one last time, and I'll bestow upon you the blessing. Rebekah hears it, and she runs and tells Jacob to go, kill some young goats and bring the meat to her, and she would prepare a meal, and he'd go in, pretend to be Esau because Isaac was going blind at this time, and steal the blessing. And he does, and they end up having to take the goat's fur and wrap around him, as the story goes, to fool their father because he was literally that hairy. But people missed that the final, cherry on top for the whole thing was, in there it says that before she sends him in, she goes to Esau's tent and says that she takes his special garments and places them upon Jacob. So I think we see him again there.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's like this little trail. I mean, if you follow it. And so we know from that instance there that Jacob now has the garments. And we know that Jacob later, his name is changed to Israel. Well, Israel has 12 sons. And here's that narrative again. The youngest son, Joseph, it has the same terminology there that was given to Nimrod in the book of Jasher. It says that Nimrod was the child of Cush's old age, whom he loved exceedingly, and he bestowed upon him the garments. And so then when you get to this story, it says that Joseph was the child of Israel's old age, whom he loved exceedingly. And what does he do? He bestows upon him a coat of many colors, is how it's translated. If we go back to Ezekiel 28, every precious stone was your covering, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper. That would be a very colorful garment.
Yes. Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so what happens to it after that?
Yeah, and there's just so many connections with it. And once you start finding them, I was having those wow moments too, because I mean it flows just like a needle and thread through a garment. You can follow it, and in that story we see that when Joseph gets these garments, he puts them on. What happens? He starts having all kinds of supernatural stuff happen. And it's not until that he gets these garments. And when he gets these garments, it says that he starts having prophetic dreams. And he says, telling his brothers, he says, the stars of heaven bow before me. Well, the stars is, equated to the angelic host many times. Job says, where were you when the morning stars, the sons of God, sang for joy at the sight of creation? And he's saying that the angelic host is bowing to him now that he has these garments. Why? Because he's the king and priest of creation with those garments. And it says that, he says, all the animals bow before me, brother. Once again, the Jewish traditions say that the wire of these subdues the animal kingdom. And he even says, and the wheat of the field even bow before me. And he said, and you, my brothers, bow before me and will serve me. And that's when Reuben and the other boys were like, we got to get rid of this dude. He got to go. And the last time we see it in that scene or setting was, we don't know if they took the entire garment or a piece of the garment, but we see that I think it was a piece personally, but I think they took a piece of the garment, ripped it off of him before they sold him, And it says they dipped it in an animal's blood and then brought it to Israel and said, this is all that's left of your son. A wild animal tore him to pieces. So they hand him this, blood-soaked priestly ephod. And the reason why I think it was just a piece is because not only do we find these garments threaded throughout these stories and legends, it even pops up in archaeology and history. I had David Roll on my show a while back, and he's a well-known archaeologist, and he's well versed in biblical history and the Egyptian history and things like that. And he was telling me that in the Bible, where it mentions the city of Ramses, he said they wrote that looking back. He said at the time it was called Ramses. He says, but when it was originally founded, it was named Avaris. And he said, and Avaris was a known Semite city. And Semite is just another, it's a political correct term for, Middle Eastern Jewish, descent person. So this kind of correlates to the story in Genesis where there was a great famine in the land. Everyone went to Egypt to try to get their grain and food, and that in the end, Joseph invites his father and all of his brothers to live in Egypt, and that the Pharaoh gives them a piece of land to have as their own. This is Avaris. They settled Avaris. That was their city. And he said that in the center of the city, they found this really big home, like twice as big as all the other ones, and it was in the center of the city. He said those were high official houses. And he said, and behind the house was a small pyramid tomb. And he said only high officials, and important people like that, got these types of burials. And when they dug in, they found that the tomb was empty. But they found broken pieces of a statue just scattered around the entire tomb. And so he said it looked like someone just had deliberately, busted this thing up. And he said, so they started gathering the pieces and washing them off and trying to reassemble this statue. And that when they did, they noticed that the skin was painted yellow. Well, the Egyptians don't paint their statues yellow. That's a Semite thing. And they got to the head. The head had bright flame red hair. We know that that was a genealogical type thing because Esau come out with red hair. And then he said, and all these different things, he said that just pointed to Semite, Semite, Semite. And he said, the final piece to the puzzle draped over his shoulders was a coat of many colors.
Oh my God.
He said, I think we found the tomb of Joseph. He said, and why was it empty? He said, the book of Genesis tells us why. Because in Exodus, when they left, they gathered up the bones of Joseph and took them with them.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not just stories. I mean, it's real.
Oh my God. Do we know what
Yeah.
happens to it after that?
Well, after that, it kind of goes quiet.
No.
And so, but what I believe, I think we see them, in my opinion, at least 2 more times. And one is with Elijah and Elijah. And I love that story. And I actually designed some T-shirts here recently and put on my store of the story of those 2 guys in First Kings, because I think it's I ain't going to try to guess the verse now. I'll butcher it. But in the story, though, it says that basically Elijah runs up when he sees Elijah, and he's like, hey, I want to follow you. I want to be your apprentice. I want to do what you do. And Elijah tells him, if you want to be with me, you got to give up everything. He said, you got to walk away from your family, everything you've ever known, because if you do this, it's a lifetime commitment. There's no going back. So you have to abandon everything. So Elijah he goes back because he was in the middle of plowing his field when he seen Elijah coming through the town. And he just stopped and left the oxen and the plow and run off after him. So Elijah goes back and he kills the oxen and burns his plow. That way, he has nothing to go back to. It's kind of like the Vikings burning their ships once they landed. It's succeed or die. And I thought that was a beautiful story. But I made like a plow on the back of one of the shirts, and it's on fire, and a guy walking away. It says, "Burn your plow." But in that story, though, you have the famous whirlwind. Elijah is taken up like Enoch, to heaven, to God in a whirlwind. Well, Elijah is following him the whole time. And Elijah's trying to basically run him off. He's like, "You can't be with me. You got to go. I got to go somewhere that you can't go." And he's like, "I'll never abandon you. I'll never leave your side." And he's like, "Well, okay, well, fine." And they get there, and he's like, "Well, I'm about to leave. What do you want from me? You want a blessing, or, what do you want before I leave?" And he says, "My wish is for a double portion of your spirit." So he could do the miracles and perform the things and do the things that he did. And he tells him, the thing you ask is not a small thing. He said, "But if you are allowed to see my departure, consider your request granted." And he witnesses Elijah taken up in the chariots of fire. And it says the only thing left behind, in the English translations, it says a mantle. Well, once again, I could be stretching here. I mean, I can admit this. I could be stretching, okay?
What's a mantle?
But it's a clothing, like a cloak or whatever. But the original language, a tunic, a canonet. His canonet fell and dropped to the ground. That was all was remained.
Wow.
And it says that Elisha picks up this mantle, this canonet, this covering, and starts walking towards the Jordan. And it says that he makes it to the Jordan River, and he takes the cloak or the mantle and smacks it onto the water, and the Jordan River parts so he can cross over.
I didn't
I
know
think
that.
I think those are the supernatural garments from the Garden of God.
Well, yeah, it has to be because the ocean obeyed. The
Yeah.
sea, everything obeys.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so then what happens after that?
And after that, there's not that I've seen anyway, any more allusions to it until you get to the book of Revelation. And here's my thing that I love, and I get so excited about finding these things. It's cool if you find something and you think it's this or that, and even if you got to kind of stretch it a little, even if you're being honest, if you're like, "Oh, I could get it there." But when you find two or three of them, it's like, okay, there's something here. But then when you find two or three of them, but the last one you find ties perfectly into the first one like a seamless thread connecting everything as a whole, it's like, no, this is a thing. And it had intention. And I think that's what this was, because when you get to the book of Revelation, and you have Jesus, like we talked about earlier, said, he was the second Adam. Where the first Adam, the first king and priest of creation that had the covering screwed up. So the second Adam had to come and get it right. And when you get to the book of Hebrews, it flat out says it connects Melchizedek, the order of Melchizedek, to Christ. And it says that he had no beginning, no mother or no father. And he reigns in the temple of God as a priest forever. It's without end. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then, so when you get to Revelation, you have the return of Christ. And he's on this, horse, and it's a conquering king imagery. The first time he came on a donkey. And if you look at the historical side of that, that is a king that won without having to kill someone. He won it by peace and persuasion. He won over the people, would ride in on a donkey. and that was a sign of his conquering and accepting the people, and the people accepting him. He took it over without war. They wanted him. But the horse imagery is war, is imagery. It's the conquering king imagery. So the first time he come in on a donkey, the second time he comes in on a war horse with a flaming sword. And it says that it describes this beautiful raiment that he has on. It says that, he has this beautiful garment, and on the thigh it says King of Kings, Lord of Lords. It talks about the crown, this flaming sword, and it says that blood is stained up to the bridle and his cloak. I think that is, and it also says the rod of iron, the rod of Moses. So I think that is those garments and that supernatural rod that was in the Ark of the Covenant. This is the two-piece set, like Zen pointed out, to the king and priest of creation. And then it's soaked in blood. That goes right back to Joseph. Joseph's garment was ripped and torn and soaked in blood. And a lot of people don't know this that are not Jewish or don't look into the Jewish context of things. They believed in two messiahs. They had the one that we see as Jesus, the one that comes and conquers and creates a new kingdom and reigns forever on the throne of David. But then there was another Messiah before, and he was known as Messiah ben Yosef.
Never heard of it.
So there's two Messiahs, and it's Joseph. And he had the garments. He done all the supernatural stuff, saved God's people. And then here we have Christ coming back, saving God's people with this garment stained in blood, just like Joseph. And I think it's God trying to show his stubborn, stiff-necked people that still don't accept him. Because a lot of people, or I ain't going to say a lot of people, but some people may not realize that the Jewish people, true Jewish people, do not accept Christ. They don't think he was the Messiah. And I think that through all this imagery, he's trying to point to this Josiah ben Yosef that they firmly believe in already, and be like, no, look at him, look at me. I'm your second Messiah. And, it's time to repent or die. I mean, basically, you know what I mean? And I think he does that a lot because he loves his people. And he talks about it all the time in Scripture. They're a stiff-necked people. And they were so hung up on Josiah ben Yosef, they missed the Christ. Same thing with Moses. They were so hung up on Moses and the law that they missed the coming of the Messiah right in their face. And if we look at those, I think that God was doing this, just like the imagery I was trying to say earlier, pointing back to the Messiah they believed in, trying to show that he was better in every way to grab his people's attention. I think he was doing it again through the stories of Moses and Jesus, because when you run those two parallel, it's pretty crazy. Moses was born a king, gets word, and tries to kill him and orders the firstborn of the nation to be killed. Well, what happens? He's put in a basket and sent to Egypt to be saved. When Christ is born, a king hears about it, orders all the firstborn to be dead. What happens? Christ and his family flee to Egypt to be saved. Moses, he goes through the Red Sea, he goes through the waters and enters the wilderness for 40 years and is repeatedly tempted, and he fails repeatedly. Christ, he's baptized by John the Baptist. He goes through the waters. What happens right after that, folks? He goes into the wilderness for 40 days and is tempted the entire time, but passes the test. And then finally, you have the serpent. It says that when God's people were being attacked by these fiery nakashes that he told him to make a bronze nakash, a bronze shining one, and place it onto a pole, and that all who looked and believed would be healed and saved. Christ was raised up on a pole. And John 3:16 tells us all who look and believe shall be saved. So all those people that still deny Jesus, I mean, he's showing you in so many ways all the things that you have your trust and hope in is false. And he's trying to show you he's better in every single way.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I've never heard that. That's amazing. Um, if the garment carried divine origins and purpose, why do you think God would allow that to fall into hands of men like Ham or Nimrod or Esau?
Because I think stuff like that, it all has, divine purpose. And uh, Zen will probably bash me over the head for not remembering this, but there was a rabbi, Perk Eleazar, and he was during the second temple, and he gave a lot of prophecies about the 10 kings. And he talked about the battle of this seed war and how the kingship, the garments, were going back and forth between these two seed lines and battling. And it's over the dominion of earth. And I think that God is a God of his word. Deuteronomy 32, he portioned out the peoples and the lands amongst the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God. So he told them, hey, this is your portion, and portioned it all out between his sons and said, it's yours to rule, to do with as you please. But Israel is my allotted portion, my allotted inheritance. And so he'd done that, and it was all part of the divine plan. He knew they would rebel. He knew that they'd, go wicked. Psalms 82 or 89, 82 or 89, I think it's 82. But it says, how long will you rule unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? You desire to rule the eternal life, but you shall die and fall like any prince. It's not talking about human folks. I mean, if you're going to die, duh, of course. He's talking to divine heavenly beings. But right after that, he calls out Abraham. And he says, through your name, all nations shall be blessed. So it was the plan from the beginning. He knew they were going to rebel. He knew things were going to turn to crap. He knew there was going to be this power struggle. But he's the devil, and all his kids are playing 3D chess. He's playing 12D chess. He's way ahead of all of them. So he had this divine bloodline established, and he knew that Christ was going to come through, the Messiah, and redeem the world, die for the sins of the world, and cover their sins, and bring them back into the family of God, and reverse what happened at the Tower of Babel. So I think that he's a God of his words. So he portioned those things out to them, so he lets them have them. But at the same time, it was originally given to mankind. And we are left to our own devices. So people want to say, oh, well, how come, if God's real, all this evil stuff happens, how come this, and this? And because he gave it to us.
I think
And
because Satan's ruling the world, right? It's Satan's ruling.
You're left to your own devices.
Exactly. This is now his kingdom currently on earth, which is why he tempted Jesus with the kingdoms, because that was his to give.
Yep. He didn't dispute him neither.
Right. Exactly. So was Adam given authority in Edom that the Nakash once held? Is that what
I
happened?
think the title and like the garments and stuff like that was given to him, but it was relocated. It was basically like, okay, this is a job that was in the heavenly temple of God, but now that guy has been fired and demoted, and you over here, you should be fired and demoted, but I'm having mercy because it wasn't as bad as his. So here's his best boss sign that was on his door. You go down to the hallway down to the left. You've lost your corner window office, and that's going to be your office now. So that's kind of how, I mean, I'm terrible with analogies, but
No, that's great.
so yeah, you got the title and the position. It's just you've been relocated. It doesn't have the zeal and the pomp that it used to have. And Paul even talks about that. He says that as far as like our dominion and how it was given to Satan, he said that dominion was given to us. And he said that we traded the truth for a lie. We worship the created things instead of the creator.
Yeah. Wow, that's exactly right.
Mm.
So was Adam meant to function more like a priest, I guess, in Eden? That's all for our free side. To listen to the rest, head over to my Patreon, sign up today for the Plus show, and get the full experience.
I want to give a big mahalo to my friend Doc Brown for joining us again and for diving into this wonderful conversation around Adam's garment. And to everyone listening, mahalo for being here, and don't forget to follow, subscribe, and make sure you join the Discord so we can keep these conversations going. I'll see you guys at the next episode. Ahui ho kako. Bye!
Losing my cool, breaking my rules. I don't usually get so out of my head, walking the edge. What am I falling into? I'm here again, where do we land? Tell me, is it too soon? Losing my cool, breaking my rules. I'm going crazy over you. I know you say you're not afraid to dive into something. You got nothing to lose, but I'm not that way. Taking my sweet time, don't wanna be the one to cry. But I'm losing my cool, breaking my rules. I don't usually get so out of my head, walking the edge. What am I falling into? I'm here again, where do we land? Tell me, is it too soon? Losing my cool, breaking my rules. I'm going crazy over you. My hands, they shake when you walk into the room, and I can't think straight. There's no one like you, but I wanna chase this feeling with you. Don't walk away from this tonight. I'm going with you. Losing my cool, breaking my rules. I don't usually get so out of my head, walking the edge. What am I falling into?